Hey everyone, welcome back. Or if you're new to the channel, my name's Chris and I'm back here at the Woodland Mills HM126 portable sawmill. And what I want to talk to you about today is if you happen to just get one of these sawmills or are thinking about it or have one on the way, I want to talk to you about some of the things that I think you should always check out at the start of the day before you start sawing lumber. I've learned the hard way on some of these, so I figure that through my experience, maybe I can save you a few headaches. Now I'm no expert. I've only had the mill for about 9 months, but there's a bunch of things that you quickly pick up on, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today. So I'm just going to jump right into it and show you some of the things that I always look out for before I start cutting lumber for the day. Alright guys, some of this stuff might seem kind of obvious, but I thought I'd just do this as kind of like a PSA, public service announcement, just if you're just starting out, just so you know that I've done some of this stuff, so hopefully I can save you from doing it. The first thing is, it might seem obvious, but just always check your track, check that there's nothing in the way before you start. I know, not with the mill running, but you know, like pulling it backwards to the starting position. If you think about it, a lot of the times you'll end your day with the blade right down, you know, only an inch off the bunks or something, and then if you come back the next day and you go to drag it down the track or something, sometimes I've left these clamps where if you drop it a certain way like this, it might just end up kind of sitting on top of the bunk like this, and then you go to drag the mill along and it bumps into here or here, or even if you throw your log stops in. I don't think I've ever done that, but you know what I mean. Just go over, check it out, make sure you're not going to hit anything, and that's just like a good first thing to do. I mean, it only takes 10 seconds, and I'm sure that most people do that every time, but I've just got myself into the habit of always checking to make sure before you even put a log on or anything that your blade's not going to hit any of this metal stuff, because that's not a good time. So that's just the first thing I always check out. So I'm not saying you have to do stuff like this every single time, but I like to just get into the habit of it. And the reason I start off my first step just checking to make sure that the blade and that's not going to hit anything for sure is because the very next thing I do is I usually just grab the mill and just roll it down the tracks like this, make sure it slides nice and easily. And while I'm doing that, I keep an eye on all four wheels and make sure they're spinning the whole way down the track as I push it along. Because if you notice that any one of the four wheels is stopped and not spinning, that means it's obviously not in contact with the track, and that means that you have a problem. Now, one of the problems could be is that your track's out of level, and you might have to adjust that. That's probably the most reasonable expectation. Now, the next thing that it could be, if your wheels aren't spinning, is I'll take you around, and if you've just set up your mill, it might not be seated down on the track properly. And if you've went around and checked and made sure that your track's nice and level, and when I say level, I mean straight. That means all your bunks are in a straight line. It doesn't necessarily have to be level. I go by level just because it's just kind of an easy way to make sure it's all straight. But if your track's perfectly straight and your wheels still are one of them's not in contact with it, what you're gonna have to do is come and undo all of these bolts. And I think in the instruction manual it tells you which ones they are, but all these bolts that are through here, through the uprights and that, and you don't have to take them right out obviously, but you just have to loosen them off enough that you know, it's not holding this all rigidly together again, and then you'll have to like kind of shake your mill, move it back a bit, and then that should help it properly seat back down onto the tracks, and then you can tighten the bolts up. And that's one thing you always want to make sure of, because it'll run you into whole host of issues if your mill's rocking and shaking on the tracks all the time. So once I've done that and that's all looking good, the next thing that I always do is open up the hood, as I call it here. And there's two belts kind of thing. There's your drive belt here and the idle belt on this wheel, and you're supposed to have about 1/4 inch of play. See, this is probably maybe just a tiny bit loose, but this is something that does, in my experience, come loose so over time. So I mean, it's not like an everyday thing, but from time to time you do have to tighten this belt up a little bit. Now what happens is when it gets really loose, it'll just slip on the wheel, and when you bring this blade into a log, instead of cutting through that log, it'll just stop, and then your drive wheel, it'll just spin on the belt instead of actually pulling the blade through the log. So that's one of the things to check out for too, if you've ever noticed cutting into a log and your blade stopping. One of the issues could be that this belt here is getting too loose. And this belt here, the main thing you want to check is just, you can run your hand around it for one thing. If you're getting a bunch of vibration when you're cutting and you can't figure out where that's coming from, one of the things that it could be that's overlooked sometimes is there could be deformities or chunks out of this belt here, and that could give you some vibrations. If not, the main thing you want to check is just that it's sitting up proud of this cast iron wheel here, because if it gets worn down so much that it's flush with the cast iron wheel, well, obviously that means that your blade's gonna, instead of be sitting on the belt, it's gonna be sitting on the cast iron wheel, and that'll obviously run you into some issues with it not gripping or probably just sliding right off. So that's the next thing that you want to keep an eye on. Like, this isn't something you really have to check out every single day, but you know, over the course of, I've had it for 9 months, there's still lots of meat on it there. So I'm assuming, you know, after 2-3 years might be worn out or something like that, but I always just keep an eye on it anyways and make sure there's no chunks or things stuck to it or anything like that. So once I make sure the belts are good to go, the next thing that's really good to check is these blade guides, because they actually play a pretty decent role in how well your mill's going to operate, and it's kind of easy to forget about them. So I want to get the camera off the tripod here and just take you in and show you what I'm talking about. So I hope I can do a decent job explaining this, but basically you want your blade from like the very bottom of this wheel to be in a straight line, obviously, over to the bottom of that wheel, and the only thing that's really gonna hinder that from happening is if you set up these blade guides incorrectly. So if I can explain this correctly, if you can set the depth and the height of these, and if you do it incorrectly, and say you had this one really high or something, I'm exaggerating, but if you had it like way up here, you could tell that your blade from this wheel would come up like that and then go back down into there. And you know, maybe if you had that one too low, you're gonna end up with your blade going like this, and you can obviously tell why that is not a good thing to have happening. So it is really important to get down here and make sure that your blade's running true through these. And what I mean by that is, I'm gonna try to get you right in here, but there should be, I have no tension on the blade right now, but if I put tension on the blade, there should just be a tiny cardboard piece of a tiny cardboard space on top and below the blade, so it should just run right through there without any contact, kind of thing, and that's how you know it's in the right position. And looking at this one, I could probably even tighten that up a tiny little bit, but I think it's still in reasonable shape. And then so that takes care of the up down part of the blade guides. I'll just take you in and show you the front back part of it. So you've got these rollers. This is on the back here, and you've got I'm trying to feel, I can't see. Oh, there they are. There's these rollers right here, and that's kind of like a backstop. So the back of your blade should be just, you know, just a millimeter in front of that. When you're normally running your blade, it shouldn't be touching that. You shouldn't see the rollers spinning. But like I was saying, it's just there for a backstop. So when you go into a log and there's pressure on it, this blade, if it does go backwards, it hits that roller, and that stops the blade from coming off backwards. And on the flip side of that, you could potentially make the mistake of having this shoved too far forward, and if there, you know, was a whole bunch of pressure pushing that blade forward, it could cause the blade to come off frontwards if you have it pushed too far forward. That might be kind of an extreme example, but I'm just doing that to kind of show you, you know, what could happen. So the optimum way is just to have it just a tiny bit behind the blade, just to give it that backstop. So I just always like to make sure of that before I start cutting each day, just to make sure that you know, nothing's shifted, nothing's moved on me. And that's just another little good check to make sure that if everything there's lined up, that the lumber coming off is gonna be good quality. And although it's kind of obvious and not a huge deal, I did just kind of skip over this part where I always just go through and take a look for any sawdust and that. I don't think it's gonna play a huge deal, but it does build up in there, so once in a while you got to give her a clean out. And I have had, you know, little sticks or chunks of wood kind of get in here, so it's nice to get that cleaned out and not have it clanging around all the time when you're trying to cut. So it's one of the things when I have the hood open at the start of each day, I'll just give it a quick brush out kind of thing. Then after that, you can get your hood closed back up. I mean, usually usually now's the time I would tension the blade up and that, but I'm not cutting right now, so let's just pretend that I tension the blade up. And the other kind of little thing, it's a minor detail. It doesn't really affect the cutting. It's just, it kind of annoyed me, so I think maybe it could annoy some other people. Is you've got three, I'll bring in here. You've got three of these clamps like this. There's one up here and there's two down below. And obviously you can see it's just, the further you screw it in like that, it puts more pressure on this clamp here, and see that's like too tight to even close, so I can loosen it off a bit, put that back on there and close it up. Now the only reason I bring that up is because I've noticed it on some of other people's videos, and I had put up with it for the longest time, is that a lot of the times when you're cutting this hood, it'll really rattle, and it's just kind of an annoying thing in my opinion. Like, it doesn't affect anything, but I fooled around with it for a bit and it kept rattling, so after a while I kind of gave up. But then I came back to it later, and I just throw it out there that if your hood's rattling a lot, that I fooled around with all three of those for a while, and it, like, I did get it to where it stops rattling if you get like the right amount of pressure on all three of them. It should stop rattling for you. So I just thought I'd throw that out there if that's something you've been annoyed with. Just play around with those three clamps a bunch, and you know, you can either cut down a lot on it or get rid of it completely. So just thought I'd throw that in there too. So the next thing I would say is that you're getting ready to cut now. You're gonna get a log up on here. If you want to save yourself some headaches, I've done this quite a bit, and it doesn't happen all the time, but even recently I do it sometimes. Is the stops here, this is basically like the back edge of where your mill's cutting, if you think about it that way, and you've got a lot more space this way. So if you're milling anything that's got bends in it or big knots, which is quite often in sawmilling, try to remember to keep any big bows or knots sticking out this way, because you have a lot more room on, well, all your room's on this side of the stops to where you're cutting. So if you have a log that's bowed like this and you put it on the mill like that, your mill's just going to hit the log, and then it's just kind of a headache. So what you can do is flip the log over so the bend goes this way, and then that'll work out a lot better for you. So that's just like another little thing when you're putting the log on the mill, just to consider that, which way the bend's going in that before you put it on, because I know it's something that I quite often just throw it up on there any which way and don't really think about it, especially if you, it actually helps if it has like a big bow, because then it kind of kicks your memory to think about that. But a lot of the times the ones with the little bows in it or knots kind of thing, you don't really think about it and you throw it up there and then your mill ends up hitting it. So just something to consider before you start cutting, to kind of look at them and see which way to orient them is best for you. All right, so the last thing I'm going to talk about today is the idle, because I see this in a lot of people's videos where their idle's set too high and it's making that tinging noise that a lot of people know what I'm talking about, and that means it's idling too high, starting to engage the clutch, and it'll wear the clutch out. And the reason I'm doing this today is because I had a comment of somebody saying they could hear that with my mill, and I didn't really even notice it when I was here cutting, to be honest. So I went back and listened to the video, and I could hear it too. So it might not be something that's always happening at idle. Maybe once the machine gets, you know, warmed up, it maybe idles a tiny bit higher or something like that, or when it's maybe first starting up, it idles a little higher. I'm not sure. I'm not good with engines by any means, but I do know where the idle adjustment screw is on this, and I have not touched it from the factory at all yet. But just listening to that video, I'm thinking that, you know, I don't like to mess with stuff like that too much, but mine might be set just, you know, just a tiny bit too high from the factory, so that in certain situations maybe it is revving just a bit high. So I thought while I was doing this, figuring it out today, maybe I just videotape what I'm doing and show you guys how to do that if you have the same issue. So I'm gonna start it up, and then I'll grab a screwdriver and show you what I'm talking about. Okay guys, I apologize for the noise of the engine, but I don't know if you can see, but right in here, there's the adjustment screw. Now, I'm standing here listening to it idle right now, and I can't hear any sort of indication that the clutch is engaging at all, that pinging sound. But I'm gonna put the screwdriver in there and just try turning this idle down a tiny little bit. I don't know if you can hear that on the camera, but I turned it down just a little bit. So that's all there is to it. You just kind of go left to turn it down, go right to turn it up, but I'm not going to get too crazy here. I just turned it down a tiny little bit. I'm going to roll with that for now, and I'm just going to keep my ear out to see if I ever hear that tinging noise again. So, okay guys, I hope that helped, because I've seen a lot of people videos where they're getting that pinging sound, and it must not be set right from the factory. I know in that I had the comment and I listened, and I was getting a little bit of it there in the one video. So I know that with this mill, it must be kind of like a little bit intermittent or something. I must be like just right on the borderline kind of thing. So I just turned it down a tiny little bit there. I think it's better to err on the side of caution than leave it turned up a little bit too high. But anyways, I just thought I'd demonstrate that because it's a super easy thing to fix and save yourself from wearing out a clutch. So hope that helped. Alright, so like I was saying, I'm not an expert. I've had the mill for about 9 months now, but you do learn quite a bit in that amount of time, and I just thought that if there's anything I've learned so far I could share with you guys, I'd go ahead and do that. I know today I focused mostly on things that I like to look out for at the start of the day, just from experience. A lot of the things that you know, can shift or move on you, or little things that can get in your way, all that kind of stuff that can just make you have a bad day. And you can avoid it a lot if you just, you know, take a couple minutes at the start of each day, check on those things, make sure you're all good to go, and not only, you know, save yourself from having an accident, but some of those things can help you cut a lot better quality lumber as well. So just thought I'd mention those in case you're somebody that maybe just got the mill or thinking about it or have one on order. Just kind of some food for thought of things that might make your experience go a lot better knowing them now instead of finding out the hard way. But anyways, that's what I have to offer today. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.